Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Dental Unfiltered. I'm Matt Brown. I'm here with my normal co-host, Dr. Andrew Vallo. We have a really awesome episode here for you guys today. You know, the real big problem in dental right now is everyone's complaining about is hiring talent. Like hiring talent's hard, whether it be your DA, you're a front desk person, office manager. But the real thing, I think it's able to be done, but it seems like there's a lot of mystery or like when to do it, how to do it, what is the right way, how do you go about it, is hiring and onboarding an associate. Is in all the dental groups right now, Nifty Thrifty, in Dental Nachos, I can't go 2 or 3 hours without seeing a post about this, about when do you hire an associate, how do you hire an associate, how do you onboard them, what is the point of that? So Dr. Vallo, with the expansion of four practices in just a couple of years, that barrier is a big bottleneck for growth. And somehow he's able to overcome it so many times and just keep hiring quality associates. So we thought it was a really good episode to bring this to you guys to kind of start removing the mystery and honestly the anxiety around hiring an associate. So Andrew, how have you able to, that is a giant bottleneck, man, for growth, is like you have to have the hands to do dentistry, right? And you got to have good hands and hands that want to work on your team. There's so many layers to this. How did you do it so many times repeatedly to get your practices where they are in 4 years? Most docs can't get 2 practices right with associates in 5 years. You did 4 kind of hands off in 2 years. So how do you manage to do that?
Hey guys, very excited for today's episode. I know this is one that many of you have been waiting on. I get dentists reaching out to me asking like, hey, when are you going to talk about this subject? And I think one of the ones that I've been asked the most for is hiring and onboarding associates. So hopefully you guys get a lot of value out of today's content. At this point in time, I believe I've hired around 7 associate dentists, somewhere in that ballpark. And I actually will likely be hiring another one shortly here as I'm working on lease negotiations for my 5th startup. Associate dentists have been a key factor in the growth of my organization. I mean, there's no way that you can go from 0 to 4 offices in a short period of time without having great associate dentists. All of my offices have been startups, so none of them have come with a practice. I've gotten pretty good at recruiting great associate dentists. And to be fair, part of it is the fact that I live in Tampa, Florida, and there are a number of associate docs in this area. So that helps me out. But I've also worked with some of my friends that have looked for associates for their practices. And some of them are in rural parts of the country, rural Washington, rural Alabama. And I've given them some advice and helped them recruit some of their associates as well. So I guess, let's start with that is where do you go to find great associates? What's the best path to try to find talent? Whenever I'm looking for an associate dentist, I don't just go to one place. I try to go to a couple different avenues to try to find this talent. One of those is Indeed. Indeed is one of our key areas for finding most of our employees. So I'll always make a post in there. Key tip, guys, whenever you make an Indeed job listing, one of my biggest pieces of advice is make sure that you actually put questions to help weed out applicants. So basically, like if I'm looking for an associate doctor, things that I'm putting in the questions that they have to answer as part of their application are things like, on a scale from 1 to 10, how comfortable are you with molar endo? All of our docs and all of my practices, well, all my general practices, we don't do endo and implant offices, but for the general practices, all of my docs do molar endo. It's almost kind of a requirement for our group. We don't refer out that treatment, unless it's a very complex case. So I'm looking for docs coming in that are already experienced and comfortable doing this procedure. You may not be looking for the same thing, and that's totally fine. But that's one of my qualifying questions is like, how comfortable are you doing this procedure? I ask them, how much experience do you have with Invisalign? As far as that goes, honestly, I have taught almost all of our associates Invisalign, so that's not as big of a deal for me, but it's still nice for me to know when I'm comparing candidates if they already have experience doing clear aligners or Invisalign. I'll ask them, how comfortable are you juggling, multiple treatment columns while also checking for multiple hygienists? And seeing emergency patients and things like that. Our offices, we move quickly. We're not one of those, you see one column of patients and then you go in and drink coffee in between patients. Like we work hard while we're there, so that we don't have to work crazy extended hours, so that we have 3-day weekends. So we're very efficient with our time at the offices. I need to find docs that are okay with, that volume, that pace of dentistry. And if they're not okay, then they're probably not a good fit. So figure out what's important to you whenever you're making the job postings. Put some of those qualifying questions in there, and that will help save you from spending too much time interviewing too many applicants, because you can kind of narrow it down to the ones that may be good fits based on their answers to those questions. So that's the first place we go to is Indeed. At the same time, I use one of my friend, Dr. Paul Goodman, Dr. Nacho. He's got his Dentist Job Connect program where basically you pay a flat fee. In my opinion, it's very reasonable. And then they'll blast out to all of these young associate dentists that are looking for jobs, your job posting. You can also make a post in Dental Nachos, his group that has, I think, 56,000 dental professionals in it. The key here, and what really helps me get a lot of applicants from that, is when I make my posting in Dental Nachos, it's not just your average job posting. I'll typically start my post with questions. How would you feel, earning this great salary on a 4-day week with 3-day weekends? How would you feel coming to an office with a great culture where everyone actually likes going to work? How do you like palm trees? Like things like that. And I'll usually put like a picture to help grab attention as well. I'm in Tampa, Florida. So, whenever I make those postings in groups like Dental Nachos, it does tend to get a lot of comments and likes, and I get dentists reaching out to me looking for jobs that way too. So, but between Indeed, Dentist Job Connect, dental Facebook groups, and the last is word of mouth. I've actually found a few of my recent associates through word of mouth. If you have a great practice, you become well known in your area. Dentists will actually help refer other dentists to you. I even go to my teams and we'll offer referral bonuses if they, find our next dentist. So, assistants or hygienists or office managers that have worked with great associates in the past, a lot of times they'll direct them to me if they're looking for a new opportunity too. So, my approach is like, we're looking for a very talented individual who's going to fit our culture, who's going to fit our vision, who's going to take care of our patients and help our practice grow. I don't just want to look at one area in a limited applicant pool. I want to look at everybody who potentially could apply for this job. Then we're going to narrow it down based on some of the qualifying questions. Then we're going to bring them into the office so they can meet the team. They can get a feel for the office. And then the very last step after they've done all of that, that's where I'll actually sit down with them and do an interview. And it's usually just over Zoom. Honestly, I feel like both parties are able to actually focus more in the interview if you're sitting over Zoom versus sitting in like a coffee shop or something like that, where there's background noise and everything else going on. So that's usually the final step. I'll typically do, maybe like 3 or 4 final interviews. And then based on feedback from my team, we'll select the candidate who's going to be our next associate dentist.
So pre-COVID, right? We thought person to person, face to face was the best. But I actually find that over Zoom, I connect and get work better with somebody because it is just your face on screen, my face on screen. It's very focused. We're like locked in, right? Like any environment can become distracting. You can do an interview at the office in Doc's office and somebody comes by and asks a question, doesn't realize you're in an interview. And then you say, hey, this is possibly a new associate. You introduce them and a whole side conversation starts and you miss out on half your interview question. The focus, the locked in part over Zoom really makes a lot of sense because I teach practices every day, office managers, docs, communication skills, all kinds of stuff. And that locked in, so this is really crazy requirement with me. If you have a meeting with me, so if you're listening, doc, or office manager, or anybody, and you get scheduled for a meeting with me, understand video, your camera working is required. And if you come on and have your camera turned off, I'm going to tell you to turn it on. But that locked in part really does create a lot of human terrain, actually navigating the person way better. So going back to hiring the associate and the culture, I think culture is a really big overcoming problem for 90% of docs. And the reason why I think it is an overcoming problem is I don't think they have a good handle on what their own culture is. So docs say, I can't hire an associate that fits my culture. My question to them is, do you know what your culture is? Have you written it down? Have you structured what it is? Like, do you even know what a good fit for you is when you're looking for this dentist? Because there's one problem to be to try to get an associate. It's another problem to get the right associate. And everyone says, well, I keep hiring the wrong associates. Well, what I'll tell you this, Doc, if you're listening, listen to this. I tell you this, that associate that wasn't a good fit for you, they're getting hired somewhere else. And that guy's going to think they're the greatest blessing that ever came in their practice. So I've seen it with how large our network of practices. I've seen an associate leave one practice and the doc hated them, and they go to another practice that works with me. And I hear they got hired there, and I'm like, I know that guy. I know where he was. And all of a sudden, that doc loves him. The guy's the greatest guy in the world. He's a hero. What? The doc that turned him into a hero, one was a strong leader, and two understood his culture. The other doc was a total mess.
Well, and I think you're right, man. I think there, just like anything else, there are better fits for different people based on your personality, based on your experience level, things like that. So, like, I've never hired a new grad, and new grads that are listening or dental students that are listening, it's nothing against you guys, but like, I know what my readiness level was as a new graduate, and I would not be able to keep up with the patient flow and the dentistry at my offices as a new grad. So sometimes you got to get your feet wet somewhere. I went to public health for 3 years. Some people, do GPRs and things like that. Some people go to DSOs, but I think either way, like you need to hone your skills, because you learn so much in dental school, but you only get so many reps in. It does take some time to get your speed up, your confidence, your time management, your patient management. I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to grow. And so that's just kind of the way that I do it. Typically, I'm hiring dentists that have at least like 3 years of experience in real world dentistry. And part of that is that I don't have with how fast our group is growing, I don't have the bandwidth to mentor, young dentists and train them up in these offices. Plus, for most of my offices, they're single doc led offices, they're associate driven startups, things like that. So if you're the only doc in an office and you're a new grad, it's going to be even more challenging, because when you run into trouble, you don't have another doc that, can kind of step in and have your back. So now in another model, if you are a more experienced dentist and you're bringing on your first associate and you've got time to really train them up, then I don't think there's anything wrong with hiring a new grad and bringing them in and getting them up to speed. So I think, again, it's just different fits for different offices. And, I always tell the new grads apply. Oh, go ahead.
I think there's I think we discount new grads, like in the hiring process. Docs like, new grad, like there's some other like notch down a notch. A new grad at a school that is aggressive clinically, that is brave, that has a good personality, can be way better than a tenured doc that isn't brave clinically and doesn't have the chairside personality. You can create skills. It's very hard to change a person. We can mentor skills to somebody.
And I'm not saying you're wrong there, Matt. And there, I'm sure there's some new grads listening that are like, oh, I would prove them wrong. And I'm sure there are ones that would. There are schools where you get more reps.
It's not 100% of them, but it's like there's maybe 10 out of 100.
Yeah, I'm going to play the numbers game. I know what myself and most of my friends graduating dental school were like, and it's not that you're a bad dentist. It's just that you don't have the amount of experience doing these procedures to keep up in a busy, fast-paced office, especially if you're the only doctor in that office. So that's why I do it that way. And again, it's nothing wrong with hiring a new grad. It has to be the right environment. I don't want to set them up for failure. I don't want to set my office up for failure. So I want them to get, and that's what I tell them. I say, hey, I appreciate your interest. We'd love to have you join the team. Like, go get a few more reps in, come back and apply in a year or two. And, it might be a good fit at that point. And I've had dentists that have reapplied, after a year or whatever. So, again, that's my philosophy. Now, here's the other thing I don't do. And I know that my friend, Dr. Nacho would approve. We don't do working interviews. I think that's a kind of a hot button topic. But for dentists, I think there's things in favor and against both of them. I think it's kind of stressful to walk into an office where you don't know the supplies, the materials, the equipment, all that they have. And all of a sudden you're doing a medical procedure on a patient with no onboarding, no training, and they're judging you on that, to hire you. So I don't do that. But often a lot of times dentists will send me their portfolios of work that they've done. We have in-depth conversations about, procedures that they are confident doing, competent doing, things maybe that they're still working on, that type of a thing. And then when we hire our new associate dentist, we do onboarding, usually before they even see a patient. So typically I try to time it out so that we'll do our onboarding meeting before they even start seeing their first patient. I do our onboarding meetings at my house. I feel like, it's a way to kind of welcome them to our dental family. So, I have a PowerPoint I put together. It's got like 170 slides. And a lot of it is just x-rays and intraoral photos and things like that. And we'll actually sit down and we'll treatment plan cases together. So we'll get out some piece of paper and we'll look at, all the x-rays, all the intraoral photos, iTero scans, from a case. They'll write down what they think should be planned. I'll write down what I think should be planned. And then we'll even look at what was actually planned on that patient. And we'll kind of discuss, differences between our plans, what was planned, things that may have been missed. So that is a really good way to calibrate. I highly, highly recommend you do that with your associate before they start seeing patients. It's more than just the calibration, though. We talk about patient experience, what's expected. We talk about leadership and team management and, how much my teams mean to me and how our associates are expected to treat our teams. So, we hold our leaders, including our associate dentists, to a higher standard. And we have high expectations of how they're going to treat our team members because there's no faster way to lose great team members than to bring in an associate dentist who is not treating them with respect. So that's a non-negotiable for us. That's a big part of our onboarding process is making sure that they understand the expectations as far as how they're supposed to treat the team. So we go through this meeting, we get them in there. Typically, the first week we try to kind of ease them into things a little bit. I try to be there, at least for their first day when I can. Doesn't always happen that way. But either way, I'll touch base with them pretty frequently over the first couple months. How are things going? We'll typically plan out the first, 5 or so Invisalign cases together to make sure, even if they have Invisalign experience, to make sure that, they're planning it the optimal way for patients. So, that's something that we'll do. We'll take a look at x-rays, post-op bite wings, things like that to make sure that, our expected quality is being upheld. And then, once I feel like they're comfortable in our organization, that's when we kind of just let them spread their wings and do their thing. Because at that point, again, they're all doctors. They've been doing this for at least a few years. So it's just making sure that we're calibrated and that they understand the expectations, the level of quality and care that are expected within our organization, our core values, things like that.
When you first get the new associate, and you hire them, how long does it take you to feel or realize like, okay, that was the right choice, or maybe it wasn't? Like, how soon do you know that? Like docs always ask me, like, how long do I give this? I hear that question all the time from docs. How long do I give this new associate?
Yeah, that's a tough question, Matt. I think the answer is it just depends. I do think you get a pretty good feel, in the first few weeks. So with all of our associate doctors, we start implementing 30 and 90-day reviews. So after the first 30 days, I meet with them with our office manager. And we have like a standardized 30-day sheet where they get scores in these different categories. We go over, their scorecard from their first 30 days. We talk about what went well. We talk about areas where we want to see improvement. Typically, even if there's some areas to see improvement, that's not the conversation where it's like, hey, this isn't a good fit. Because in my mind, they're still pretty brand new to the practice. They've only been there for, a month. I want to give them some constructive feedback and I want to see how they do over the next 60 days. And then at that point, we'll have a 90-day meeting. And hopefully any of those areas we were looking for improvement, we saw, and things are a good fit at that point. But if we get to the 90-day meeting and, overall they're doing pretty well, but there's still some areas of concern where they're not living up to, our expectations, then usually what I'll do at that point is give them a 30-day action plan with specific, written out areas that we need to see improvement over the next 30 days. So the 30-day check-in is just kind of like, hey, how's things going so far? How can we help you? What areas are we looking at? The end of the 90-day review is kind of like where we take a little bit more of a critical approach. And then again, if there are areas that we do really still need to see improvement, that's where we do that 30-day action plan. And then, after that 30-day action plan, if we're still not seeing those areas of improvement, that's where we would consider, ending that associate relationship. Now that said, if there was major issues early on, we wouldn't wait for the 30s, 90, action plan, all that stuff. So, if their quality of care is putting your patients in jeopardy, your reputation in jeopardy, if they are just absolutely terrible to your team and they're making great team members want to quit, I would not give it that much time. Fortunately, we've never been faced with that situation though. So, my goal is I want to do everything I can to set up our associate dentists for success. We do have high expectations in our organization. But again, I also spend a lot of time with the hiring process so that hopefully we are bringing in the person who is the right fit and they just need a little bit of guidance, to get fully up to speed with us.
Yeah, that's a tough question because the barometer for it is so wide. Like when you know they're good, how do you know they're up to speed, how they clinically up to speed? Is there a staff member they're just not getting good chemistry with and working with? Are they just getting comfortable talking to patients for the first time? Are they worked at a DSO forever where it was really fast paced in one culture, then they they have to adapt. That is really, 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 really hard. Really hard. What is with you getting new associates and hiring them? What do you think your success rate has been for retaining the ones you wanted? And how much of it do you think was actually impacted by culture versus them actually being just good dentists?
So, so far, the associates who have been good fits for my organization, knock on wood, we haven't had any leave. And I'm sure at some point, that will happen. But that's a great transition. Actually, that was something else I wanted to talk about was, how, how do you maintain these great associates? How do you keep them within your practice or your group? I think a few key things for us is like with our organization, again, I market heavily. Our offices stay busy. If you want to know the fastest way to make an associate leave, don't give them any treatment. So, you've got to do your best to keep their schedule full. I only practice 1 day a week, but even when I was practicing more and I had an associate with me, my goal was always to fill my associate schedule before my own. I would rather see them busy doing treatment, being productive, so that they're earning their production bonuses versus me, because I have a million other things I can be working on. If there's a hole in the schedule, have been plenty of times that I've said, hey, I see you've got a hole. Like, why don't you see my treatment patient and I'll go answer these emails I got to answer. Or I'll go deal with, working on payroll or whatever else I've got to do. So I think if you want your associate to succeed and you want them to be happy and you want them to stay in your practice, your focus should be keeping them busier than you. And I know a lot of docs are like, oh man, but like, I'm going to take a loss in my production pay. I'm going to take a loss in my income. And honestly, you probably will. So this is something to think about. If you're thinking about hiring your first associate, you should go into this expecting that you're actually going to probably take home less money in the short run. And that's okay, because this is a long-term play. This is not like, hey, hire an associate and all of a sudden your take home is going to be more in the first 6 months. This is, hey, hire an associate to grow your practice, to give you more flexibility, more freedom. And in the long run, your take home is going to be higher and the value and equity of your practice or your group is going to be higher. So you've got to think about that as a long-term play. You've got to, see the forest through the trees. If you get stuck up on like, oh, I thought hiring an associate was going to make me more money, and in the short run you're like freaking out about it, your associate's probably going to leave because you're going to be so focused on taking all of their treatment, and that is the worst way to treat your associate.
So we're going to wrap this up here, guys, right here. But that in contrast is the other post I see all the time. So we see one post that is, doc hiring an associate, and it's like, when do I do it? How do I do it? What is the rate? There's so many questions about it, right? We see that post every few hours. The other post we see is, hey, I'm hired working for this doc, and he takes all my production, right? And he's not getting a chance to do the job, right? I think docs hire with the spirit of, this person's going to make me more money. I think part of what they're missing for that is you hire it with the spirit of, this person's going to buy me freedom that'll allow me to go do things that'll make me more money. If you think that you're doc one and you're doing $100K a month in production, and you're going to hire doc two and make no changes, and it's going to go to $150K, and doc two was the reason why you're making more money, you're wrong, because that pond you're in is only so big. What happens is you hire doc one and you hire doc two, And then Doc 1 has the ability to go cultivate the pond to make it bigger and have some freedom to give more stuff to Doc 2. So that way you make more money off Doc 2. And I think that is very looked at through the wrong lens.
No, I agree, Matt. And I know we have to wrap this up soon. I got a couple, I think we got about 5 minutes. So I want to make a couple more points here. So, first of all, so we were talking about going into hiring an associate with the right mindset and realizing that your production is probably actually going to go down because, if like, let's say you're doing 100,000 in your own production and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to add an associate who's going to do 75,000. Chances are there's not going to be an extra 75,000 that's going to magically appear in your practice overnight. So, some of that should be added production, but some of that's going to come out of your production as well. So just realize that. But then the second point is, if you bring on an associate, especially if it's the first time or you're adding, an additional associate, you've got to increase your marketing spend. So, you've got to bring in more new patients for that associate to see. And I think, again, this is the way where dentists look at things the wrong way. A lot of times they think, oh man, I'm investing more money hiring an associate dentist. I've got to cut expenses other places. If you don't increase your marketing budget, or even worse, if you decrease it to try to cut expenses, do you think there's going to be enough patients for both you guys to see? I mean, probably not. Unless you've got one of those practices where you're just booked out months and months and you're bringing on an associate out of necessity. I always bring on team members earlier than I think I really need them because I want to use them as a catalyst to help grow my practices faster. So, hey, I don't think I'm quite ready for that associate yet. I'm going to bring them in and I'm going to increase my marketing, but maybe I'll double it. Maybe I was spending $12,000 a month and now I'm going to spend $24,000 a month to just really get in a bunch of new patients. So you've got to have that abundance mindset if you want your associate to be successful and you want them to grow in the practice quickly. But again, even with spending more money, I'm still trying to give up my treatment so that they stay even busier. So what else helps retain the associates long term? We have all of our practices are open 4 days a week. So all of our associates have 3-day weekends. I think that's huge. Dentistry is hard, guys. Let's not, beat around the bush here. It's hard on our, minds. It's hard on our bodies. I think having a shorter work week is helpful. And when I was an associate, I was actively seeking jobs that had 4-day work weeks. So that is something that can set you apart. Our associates don't get like an emergency phone they have to answer over the weekends. I had one associate position where there was an emergency phone that we every weekend a different associate took home. So you had it every few weeks. I hated that. You're an associate for a reason. If you want all the burdens of being an owner, you're going to go buy a practice or start a practice. If I'm an associate, I want to go in there. I want to take great care of the patients. I want to get paid and I want to go home and then I want to live my life. So if you're making your associates take an emergency phone over the weekend, let me tell you, they're probably resenting that. And there's a good chance that they may be looking for another opportunity. So don't do that. Hire an answering service. If it's a true emergency, step up and take it yourself. You're the practice owner. But once again, guys, as I've told you before, almost never do we go in on the weekends. So, there are other ways to go about that, but don't put that burden on your associates. The other thing we do, they have a life. They have a life. They do.
Like, they have a life. Like, think about the human terrain here a little bit. Like, they got a life. You don't own that person.
Because our practices are so busy, because we market so well, because we prioritize filling our associate schedules, my associate docs this year should all earn, somewhere between 300,000 and the top one's probably going to get pretty close to 800,000 this year. So, again, you want to talk about how do you retain a great associates, great talent, have an office where they're going to be busy, do a lot of procedures and take home great pay. That's a great way to do it as well. So, there's a lot more to this equation. Again, as always, guys, if you have a specific question about hiring, onboarding, or maintaining and keeping great associates, feel free to send me an email. My email is docvallodds@gmail.com. We may do a second part about associates at some point, but I think this was at least a great starting point for all you guys that have been asking about this. As always, guys, we really appreciate you listening. If you enjoyed the content, if you got a lot out of this, please take a second, hit the follow if you haven't already, hit subscribe, share this podcast with a friend. And if you could leave us a review, Matt and I read every single review that comes in, and we really appreciate
love
them.
the reviews. We
Thanks,
love the
guys.
reviews. Hey guys, yeah, definitely like, subscribe, share. Please share the podcast, guys. If you find a podcast that you're like, man, this is really important. There was a guy recently who really loved the 1400 Reviews podcast and he shared it. Guys, please share the podcast to share the knowledge with other dentists. We don't really get paid for this. This is something me and Andrew do. And the spirit of it is to give content out there that you guys can actually action on and actually improve your professional lives or your personal lives with it. So please, if it helped you, share it with another. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day.